All right, everyone. Can I have your attention and can you put your monitors down, please? All right, we're going to do a brief lecture, nowhere near as long as the last one, I promise, and then jump right into one more lab. And then we'll do an additional code example at the end of the morning. And then you'll be almost ready for the rest of the day. We have one more lecture in the afternoon, but it's more let's tie everything together than any new material. So what we want to transition to now is we've learned how to use state a little bit. We now are going to learn how to reuse components more effectively. We know that the whole point of having a component is having, like, I have this view, and it's bundled into this wonderful function or class that I can reuse in multiple places. When we're using state, it's not super reusable because we are expecting, like, this component has a specific type of behavior. A lot of time, though, our components don't have behavior. They don't have state. A lot of times they really are just, I want you to give some view and I'll give you some data. We just want them to be functions that input some data and output some view. These are much more reusable. So with that in mind, there are two ways to write a component. We looked at the class method of writing a component. So this is where we are going to create a class. It always has to extend React.component. That's the class that it has to inherit from so that it knows it's a React component. But we can also create a simple function and have that function return some JSX, and that would be our view. We'll talk more about those in a minute, but we're going to be using function components for the rest of this short lecture while we talk about props and state. So we have this little application. It is just a small, tiny site that you click on one of these, I don't know, whatever they are, ingredients, foods, toppings, and it changes your favorite pizza topping to whatever it is that you clicked. Pretty small, tiny app. Here's what our JSX might look like, or here's what our HTML might look like. This is what we want the end product to be. So perhaps I have something called topping list. Inside of the topping list is where I want to put all of my different ingredients. So this is a component that I can use in multiple places. I want to have inside of that maybe some other components that represent each topping. So I might have a cheese component, a broccoli component, an anchovies component, because each of these is going to have a different view. So I have cheese, and it might return a list element with cheese. Broccoli returns a list element with broccoli. Anchovies, list element with anchovies. And if I had 7, 8, 10 of them, I'd have to have 7, 8, or 10 components. That's not cool. What I want instead is a component that can take some data that might be variable, and I can use that data to interpolate it into my view. So this isn't state in that I'm not really changing this data based on user interaction. It's just some regular values that I'm passing to this component so that it knows what it is that it needs to render. So the way that we do this is we're going to give attributes. These attributes, like HTML attributes, can be anything. Like this says type, but it could also say topping. Or it could say like ingredient. It could say puppies. It doesn't matter what it says. Just remember that you are creating here a key value pair. Then now inside of topping, I have some variable named type that's going to be equal to the string cheese. So now if I create my topping component, I need a way to get to type. And I do that through what's called the props object. When I'm using a function component, props is going to be what is passed to my component as an argument. So I have this function, it gets props as an argument, and I'm able to say I want to create a JavaScript expression, and I'm going to pull the type off of props. Remember I said that these are creating key value pairs. If I type cheese and maybe I say size, like large, the kind of topping it is, then I'd have two properties on my props object. I'd have type and I'd have size. So if I have type cheese, this is going to go into the props object as props.type, and it's going to have the value of cheese. Then I can use that inside of my view. Now I can use topping multiple times in multiple places, passing it different values to view or to render to the screen. Props are conceptually and syntactically very similar to an HTML property or HTML attribute. All the props that are passed into a component will become key value pairs on that component's prop object, and every component has its own props object. For the function components, it's passed in as an argument. Inside of class components, you can access it via this.props. Any questions about that? Right, when working with props, we can only pass props in a single direction. React has what we call unidirectional data flow. This means if we view our UI as like this hierarchy of components or this hierarchy of HTML elements in like what at the end gets rendered, we can only pass these props data from a parent to a child, which kind of makes sense, right? Like back in topping list, topping list is a parent and it has 3 topping components as children. Topping list is the only place that I'm actually seeing and using these topping components, and so it's only from topping list that I can give each of these a type. I cannot, from inside topping, give a prop to topping list, not unless I'm rendering topping list within the render method of topping. That data always flows down. The cool thing about that is that I can still have data be affected at the top level. So for example, when I click on cheese, I want my favorite pizza topping to then be cheese. But if I click broccoli, I want to change that top level element. I want to change topping list to show broccoli. And I want to change anchovies to be anchovies if I click on it. So here's our hierarchy. We have topping list that has 3 children, topping. Looking at this hierarchy, where should our state live? First off, what is the state? What's dynamic or variable inside of this tiny application? What's changing? Right, my favorite topping, right? My favorite topping that's being rendered in topping list. So that's my state. So I'm going to have my state object live up here with topping list. And so it'd be like my selected topping, my favorite topping, will be stored up there. So what I need to do is I need a function that can change my state, my selected topping, right? Just the way we did with our click handler. So I'm going to create a function, and it's going to be up here. And I can pass that function to topping to get it to update my selected topping. What we don't want to do is what you see on this slide. What we do not want to do is, oh, well, these also need to know about selected topping. Not necessarily. What we want instead is, I think I misunderstood this. What we want instead is selected topping can now be passed down as a prop to topping. So we're not keeping track of selected topping as state inside of our topping components. We're taking the state that's in the highest level in topping list and passing it down as a prop so that each of these toppings do know who the current selected topping is, but they aren't keeping track of it. We're passing it down from parent to child. The reason we might want this is because our topping needs to know if it's selected so we can put this underline property on it, right? We might want to change the style in some way if it's the currently selected topping. So our topping list might look something like this. We have this.state, the selected topping is cheese. And then we have an H1 saying what our favorite topping is, and it's our selected topping that's currently in the state. And then we have our selected topping as we're passing down the selected topping to each of our topping components as a prop, so that each of them can know what the selected topping is at any given time. And the reason we might want that is here's topping. Topping is a function component, and it takes in props, and we can say, okay, are you selected or not? And we'll say, okay, if I am the selected topping, and it equals the type of my prop, so like, I am broccoli. If the selected topping is also broccoli, then is selected can be true. And based on is selected, I can decide to add certain classes that might have certain styles or show certain things. So now, though, we need a way to change it. So now we have a choose topping function that we have inside of topping list. Choose topping allows us to update the state. So this.set state, and we want to change the select topping to whatever the argument of this function is. How do we want to let topping affect the state of there? I already told y'all that we can only have data go in a single direction, unidirectional. But we still need a way for, if I click on topping, one of these each toppings, we need a way to update the state of topping list. So we're going to pass this function down as a prop also. So now topping has both the selected topping and choose topping, which means that topping can invoke choose topping, pass itself to that function, and that will update the state in topping list, which is really cool. This is another reason why binding is so important. We don't know where in our application this function is going to be called. Some other component might actually be calling it. But we still wanted to update the state of topping list. It's this object should always be topping list, even if it's being invoked inside of topping. So let's take a look at what this looks like as a graph. So up here we have the parent, the green one. This has a state, selected topping, and some handle click function. We are passing down our handle click function, which is the choose topping in the previous slide. And we're also passing down our props.selected topping. When the user clicks on one of our toppings in order to change their favorite topping, we're going to invoke the handle click. Oh, it's actually flashing. I don't see the flashing down here. And it's going to, when this is clicked, it's bound to our parent component. So the state that's going to change is going to be the state of the parent component. But when the state of the parent component changes, that means that the props that are passed down to the children changes, right? Because I'm passing down the selected topic. And that means that React sees this. It sees my state has changes. Let's see what all has changed throughout all of the components that are being rendered. And it's going to go through this update process and change in its virtual DOM anything that needs to be changed, take those changes and apply them to our actual DOM. And all of this is going to happen automatically when we call setState. Great. So let's go back a bit and talk about these class components versus functional components. When to use each. A class component we know is defined with the class keyword, and it can have state. We can create a state object inside of the constructor, and we can change it in various ways. It has to have a render method, but it may also have additional methods, such as our click handler or choose topping. And it can access any props passed to it by its parents using the this context. So we can say this.props, but there won't be arguments that are passed down. A function component, on the other hand, is not a class. It's just a function. It's still going to create a component. Like React is smart about the rendered JSX that's coming back, and it will treat it as a component, but it's still just a function. Props go in, JSX comes out. It can't do anything else. Doesn't have any state. It can't have any additional methods or functionality. The return value is the render. So the return value of a functional component is exactly the same as the render method inside of a class. The class just has extra stuff in it, extra functionality. If it can access props passed to it via the first argument to that function. So we have, no matter what we call it, we might not even call it props, but whatever that argument is, that will be the props object. So which one's better? About snaps for claps, sorry, snaps for class. I'm having a really hard time doing it. Snaps for class component and stomps for functional component. All right, so we got quite a few snaps. Did anyone stomp? What?
I didn't even hear exactly what you said.
Oh, stomps for functional components. Okay. That is what I said. All right, so if you have any shy stompers, you are correct. But I didn't hear any. Oh, functions. So they're both great. You use certain ones at certain times. You know, this is one of those times where bigger is not better. In fact, often in programming, bigger is not better. Functional components are simple. Classes are complex. Functional components are also easy to use, they're easy to define, and they are much more reusable because they essentially give me props and I will give you a view. That is like, at its heart, what React does. The classes are because logic is complicated. Sometimes we need classes. I'm not saying not to use classes. What I'm saying is if you have a choice, if you don't need all the extra fluff, then you shouldn't actually use it. If you don't need extra fluff, you should use a function component every single time. So, the rule of thumb here is write lots of functional components that can be reused, and then write a few class components that control your state. That's the rule of thumb we're gonna go with. Pure and simple. So, I'm going to open up another lab that is going to be very similar to the last one, but we're going to be incorporating more use of props, and I believe some functional component stuff as well. It is called, I believe, State and Props is the name of it. Bear with me for a minute while I open up the workshop and the repo. We'll start our next lecture at 11:15. 11:20. 12:20. We'll have our next one at 12:20. It'll be about 40 minutes long. It'll be until the end of the morning, and then you'll get a nice long break. All right, the workshop is open, and I'm working on the repo. Right, everything is open.